In this video tutorial, we're going to go over how to code and transcribe simultaneously in the transcription window. Of the two typical methods of transcribing, the method that we'll go over in this tutorial is definitely the lesser used method and really should be reserved for specific situations where discourse analysis is really paramount to your work. Said differently, generally speaking, it makes more sense to actually code the instances with a code window in the timeline first, then transcribe where necessary after coding first. But this method, we will transcribe and code simultaneously, and then take that information and push it back to the timeline. So the first thing we'll do, you can see I have a movie package open here. I'm going to go to File, New, Transcription window, and then I'll hit Position, and that orients the windows neatly for me on the screen. And the first thing we'll do is then check this box on the timeline, which sort of turns on these looping markers, which we'll talk about in a moment. You should also at this point be familiar with all the keyboard shortcuts that are covered in another video tutorial. Very helpful specifically for this method of transcription. So you can see my playhead is here on the timeline, and we've checked the box on the timeline. I'll now single click in the first time reference cell. So the first thing we can do is use a keyboard shortcut Control-I to mark in when the cursor is in this time reference cell. Actually, the cursor doesn't necessarily need to be in this time reference cell, but to start with, let's point out the fact that it is. And just arbitrarily, I'll mark in here. We can change that later, but the first thing we want to do is just establish a mark in point. So I'll go Control-I on the keyboard, and that establishes a mark in point at 7 minutes, 48 seconds and change. And this duration right here, 5 seconds, is the default amount of time that you'll see the video is going to be looping. So we don't know who the speaker is yet, right? Because we haven't listened to the video. So now I'll just play the video. Control-L is the shortcut.
You'll be labeling the fraction, and you're going to compare the two fractions. You'll be labeling the fraction.
Okay, so you can hear that video just loops in 5-second increments. That loop can be changed right here on the transcription window. So if you can sort of handle a longer utterance or statement, then you can change that loop there. For me, I'll just leave it at 5 seconds. Let me listen again to what was said.
And you're going to compare the two fractions. You'll be labeling the fraction.
So the cursor is in the speaker cell, and it's the teacher speaking. That teacher eventually will become a row name. So the speaker column will become a row name in the timeline.
And you're going to compare the two fractions. Be labeling the fraction.
She says we're
and you're going to compare the two fractions. Be labeling the fraction, and you're going to compare the two fractions.
Okay, so I hit Control-K just to pause it there. Remember, we've marked in, but we haven't marked out yet, and she's not done speaking yet. So I want to hear more of what she's going to be said. So here's where I will use the keyboard shortcut F2, and you can see that just advanced the looping markers 4 seconds. So it actually overlaps the last second of the first portion of what she was saying and gives you another 4 seconds. So if I let this loop here, we can hear what's being further said.
We're going to do this through a discussion. We're going to talk about which piece is pins. We're going to do this through a discussion. We're going to talk about which piece is pins. We're going to do this through a discussion. We're going to talk about which piece is pins. We're going to do this through a discussion. We're going to talk about which piece is pins. We're going to do this.
So let's just imagine for our purposes here that this is the end of her sentence.
Through a discussion, we're going to talk about which piece.
So I just paused it at the end of which piece. So my thought in my head is that I now want to mark out and end the instance here. So you might imagine Control-I was mark in. I'll use Control-O to mark out. Now when I do this, watch what happens to the cursor in this sorter. I'll hit Control-O right now. That ends or marks out the first instance. So one thing that happened is this duration just turned or switched from 5 seconds to 8.66 seconds, it automatically marks in this next instance and auto-fills the speaker cell, presuming that the same person is saying something else that might be noteworthy. If it's not, we can quickly change that, and it sets the looping marker back to 5 seconds. And we can also change the mark in point as well if we need to. So let's do that. We'll go ahead and use Control L to play and start the looping.
Is bigger than the other piece. Like if I was comparing 1/2, think of this is bigger than the other piece. Like if I was comparing 1/2, think of this is bigger than the other piece. Like if I was comparing 1/2, think of this is bigger than the other piece. Like if I was comparing 1/2.
So let's just say I didn't want that little portion of what she was saying before she says, like if I had. And in other words, in my head, I want to change the mark in point. Let me play the video and then pause it just before she says that.
Think of this is bigger than the other piece.
So now I've paused the video just before where I want my new mark in point to be. So I can just simply hit Control I on the keyboard. That changes the mark in point. You just saw that switch from 757 to 759. It's still the teacher. I'll just tab over to the next cell. So I have a new mark in point. Control L.
If I was comparing 1/2, think of this as a pizza.
So you can now hear the utterance starts with like.
Like if I was comparing 1/2, think of this as a pizza. Like if I was comparing 1/2, think of this as a pizza. Like if I was comparing.
Now I'll hit F2. It'll advance those looping markers again by 5 seconds and overlap the 1 second.
And I'm really hungry. What I want to eat. And I'm really hungry. What I want to eat. And I'm really hungry.
I'll hit F2 again. I don't need to pause it every time. I'm just pausing the video so you can hear my voice here.
You want to eat half of the pizza or 1/4 of the pizza? You want to eat half of the pizza or 1/4 of the pizza? You want to eat half of the pizza or 1/4 of the pizza?
I'll hit F2.
Which is a bigger piece of pizza? 1/2. Which is a bigger piece of pizza?
So I just paused it there. And now in this case, I want to end the instance. So I'll use Control O. Marks out of that instance, automatically marks in. I think a student is about to answer that question, so I'll change the speaker there, tab. Let's start the play again with Control L.
1/2, you are right, 1/2. So we're gonna be comparing.
So I tried to pause that right after the student spoke and said 1/2. Not sure if you could tell with that she said that. Then I'll mark out. And I think the teacher is going to confirm that answer. So let's play.
1/2, you are right, 1/2. So we're going to be comparing fractional 1/2.
Yeah, so she says 1/2, you are right, and whatever else from there. So hopefully this gives you a sense of how to code and transcribe simultaneously F1 and F2. So for example, watch on the timeline. I'll use F2, advances the looping markers forward. F1 returns them in the same increments in case you need to review something. And Control I, Control O, just adjust or create the mark in and out times wherever you are for the row that you happen to be on. So now I have this information in the transcription window, but let's select all. And now I'll sync, or it's really a push, this information back to the timeline. So you can see that it actually created the instances, and if I hover my mouse over them, you can see that just above the number line, all the transcription is there. So hopefully that gives you a decent sense of how to code and transcribe simultaneously, and then make sure to push it back to the timeline afterwards. Thanks for watching.